Right, has your community changed since COVID? There's no doubt that villages, towns, tower blocks, estates, well, they sprung into action when the pandemic started. You've heard about all this amazing effort on Make a Difference every hour for months here on BBC Radio Wiltshire. But how do we keep that going? Especially now as people get back to work, back to normal life, and we all try to move on and recover from all of this. Well, let's talk about it. I want your ideas and I want your experiences as well. What's changed where you are in your community? And what would keep that going? 08000 283366, and you can text 81333, put Wiltshire at the start of your message. Danny Kruger is Conservative MP for Devizes, and he's made a report for the government about exactly this. Good morning, Danny.
Good morning, Marie.
There is an admission that the excellent work that happened in lots of communities happened without government involvement. So why do we need you? What can this report do?
Well, we might not need central government, although I think we do. We definitely need local government. So what happened in Devizes and all over the country, but I can speak for Devizes, before the lockdown happened was announced, the local church, St James's Church, saw it coming and put out the word to their congregation and to their network. And within days, they had hundreds of people who'd signed up to help out for people who were going to have to stay at home. And so the church did this spontaneously. And that is fantastic. And then the council stepped in a few days later, once the lockdown was announced, and they were thinking, what are we going to have? How are we going to help with this situation? And they said, and this was the right call for them, let's not try and do it ourselves and reinvent the wheel. The church has already organised people, but they need some infrastructure. They need some help. So the town council handed over its building, literally, to the volunteer group, gave them some space, gave them telephone lines, and the town hall in Devizes became the centre of this voluntary community effort. So it's about partnership between government and society. You know, it's so much better if they work together.
I mean, this was all really possible because so many people were off work, they were on furlough, they had extra time on their hands and they could put in that extra effort. As more people get back to work and are encouraged to get back to work, how can we continue to be helping our community?
Well, you're right. And we had a lot of spare capacity, as it were. I could do it because, lockdown, I'm spending days in the constituency that I wouldn't normally, and I could get stuck in personally, and I can't do that now. But I say that, actually, I think we've got huge capacity, huge numbers of people with the time, if they want to use it for this, to get stuck in. And many of them are retired, many of them are students and young people. I'm afraid to say, there's going to be an unemployment spike. We're going to have people with time in their hands, and I think we should be using those people, and if necessary, actually paying them, which is something we could discuss, to play a role in their communities. So, but even at times of high employment, when everybody's busy, it is amazing how people, if they want to, and if the opportunity is there, and if the kind of incentives are right, and if they feel the motivation, how they can find time just to be good neighbours. It might only be half an hour a week, but there's always something that people can do if they want to.
OK, well, let's bring in one of those volunteers that you've praised in this report, Keith Rattray in Warminster, recently given an award by Warminster Town Council for work in the community, helping various local charities and groups. Keith, you read the report. What did you make of it?
Well, firstly, good morning, Marie, and good morning, Danny.
Good morning.
I have to be completely honest. Everything I do as a personal basis. I don't sort of seek reward, and I don't expect to be helped. In fact, I'm a firm believer in keep it in the community. I personally don't want any sort of help from the government. Reading through the report, Levelling Up Communities, I just sat there. My initial thing was, if it's not broken, why do you want to change it? I mean, as for Neighbourhood Day, everyone I meet, they all say, we've had enough days off. And I really have.
Well, yeah, let's bring in that point, Keith, because I was going to come on to that. In the report, there is a proposed Neighbourhood Day, which would be like an extra bank holiday to focus on our communities. Danny, do we need another day off?
Well, I was inspired with that idea by what they do in France. So every May in France, they have it's called a Fête de Voisins, which is a fête for neighbours. And it's just become an amazing thing. And if you've ever been to France on one of those days, the whole village comes out, or the whole street, and they have a big lunch and they celebrate each other, and people make connections and links they didn't have before, slightly like we've had actually during the lockdown. All sorts of relationships are enabled. and it's an opportunity to celebrate what is happening in the community. I think there should be more rewards, and I mean, Keith says he doesn't want rewards, and I really respect that. But sometimes to have some recognition is really welcome, and it encourages others. So I think, I mean, it's an idea. All of these ideas, by the way, I'm not suggesting government just does them. I really think it's important that all of these ideas are discussed, and they should only happen if people want them. But I think it would be a nice thing to do once a year to celebrate the fact that we actually all live in communities. I'd like to see it, people want to close off their street and have a street party like, in the Jubilee. I think there's an opportunity to celebrate each other as neighbours would be welcome in some quarters.
Okay, Keith, I'm going to come back to you. You said you did all this without wanting reward or recognition. You don't need intervention.
No.
What would actually help, do you think? Because you're doing something obviously brilliant. What would encourage more people to do it?
I don't think people need encouraging. People like myself are out there and they're only too willing to help. I mean, you've only got to look at the U3A community nationally, and they're all out there helping each other and the community, WI, all that sort of thing. But local groups, I would think, help from the council in funding for second-hand PCs and that sort of thing. Okay. And as for the volunteer passports, sorry, Danny, but I've got to say what I say. The volunteer passports, my view of that after 30 years in the fire service and 6 years in the army, is that is the government, as I see it, I should say, organising the good faith of the volunteers to suit government needs. And that's from experience, I should say. Okay. The volunteer reserve, it really is too broad and likely to become top-heavy. That's only because I've seen things like this happen before over the years. I started my community work in 2005 when I retired from the fire brigade because I was bored. And I'm used to helping the community as a soldier and as a fireman. I'm used to being in there and helping. I need to be outside doing things. My specialty was IT. And when I read the big tech thing, it's a lovely idea, but I do think that perhaps the boat has been missed as social media, Facebook, Google Diary, Dropbox, they've all filled the gap. All the voluntary groups are using them. You've only got to look at Warminster Action Group that filled the gap in town during the emergency. They were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Heart of Warminster, they all did it. They all did the same thing, social media.
Keith, we're going to leave it there for now, and I'm going to come back to you, Danny, to respond to some of those points in just a minute. So much to discuss there, and I thank you, Keith, for your time today and for what you've been doing in Warminster. Danny Kruger, stay on the line and we'll come back and we'll talk more about this. And I want your experience. We've heard a bit about Warminster. What about where you are in Wiltshire? Has your community changed? And what would keep that going? 08000 283366. And you can text 81333. Start your message, Wiltshire. To be some kind of positive outcome from all of this. I've been looking through a 52-page report by Devizes MP Danny Kruger on exactly that, how we can all improve our society based on what we've all learned. Some of the headlines: a new bank holiday celebrating neighbours, a volunteer passport system, more support to help people volunteer, £500 million for community recovery, more emphasis on getting people online, giving local people more say with what happens where they live. Danny Kruger is back with me. Thank you for your time today. Just following up on some points that Keith made in Warminster, having had 30 years of experience of helping out in his community. He wants more money for local councils to support the volunteer efforts going on. Do you think that's necessary?
Yes, we do need more money, of course. And I mean, Keith was saying on one hand, government should get out of the way and let people get on with it, which is basically what I think. But he was also saying, which I agree, that government should get behind community effort. And, the fact is, this stuff doesn't happen for free. Yes, we've got a huge sort of free resource in people's goodwill and their spare time and all their skills and compassion. And that's the real wealth in our communities, not money. But still, we need, particularly when there's more complicated work to be done, you need an office, you need computers, you need systems to support the voluntary effort. And so, yes, my idea is that government should create a new endowment that's, in perpetuity for forever, releases money into local community groups, not into public services, but into local community groups, and then we can see people just get on with it, like Keith was describing.
Okay, and what response have you had from the rest of government about this? Because the report makes all kinds of recommendations, but what might happen, if anything, following this?
I hope a lot, but as I said before, and I really mean this, I don't think it's right for a single MP or indeed government itself to just say, right, well done everybody, brilliant community effort in the lockdown, we're now going to do X, Y and Z to carry on that good work. This will only happen, anything will only happen if people want it to. It's voluntary, it's what the whole point of this is. So to design the policy framework for the future, I really want that to be collaborative and to be done with people and with communities. So what is happening now is government, and I've had a very nice letter back from the Prime Minister saying, thank you for your ideas. We're now going to engage communities across the country in a conversation about how to support voluntary effort going forward. There's a bunch of specific policy ideas like those funding ideas that are now being considered by different government departments. But the big one, which is how free citizens, you and me, in our free time are going to play a role in our communities, that's something we have to discuss and decide together.
Okay. How does all of this fit in with the latest set of restrictions imposed to keep a lid on COVID? And part of that being people being urged to dob in their neighbours to the police if they've got gatherings of more than 6. That goes against the whole idea, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I hope that you wouldn't. The first thing you'd do if you felt safe doing so was to talk directly to your neighbours. We need relationships in our communities if they're to be strong. And, I think a lot of people make mistakes without realising it. And, so, unless you've got reason to be scared, which I totally understand, I think the first thing to do is to knock on the door next door, make a phone call, and or just to challenge people directly, politely. And they might realise, I didn't realise I was, or oh dear, okay, fair enough, I'm banterised. So I think we need strong communities before we need the police. But we do need ultimately the police to be there, and we do need people. If someone is flagrantly, putting people in danger, putting the rest of the community in danger by breaking the rules, then of course the police need to act, and the police can only act if somebody tells them there's an offence taking place. Okay,
well, keep listening. I'm also joined now by Ann Stuchbury in Bishopston near Salisbury, set up the Flamston Street Exchange during lockdown to help residents. Ann, hello, welcome to the programme. You've also read through the report. What did you make? Anything helpful in there for you?
Well, I do think overall organising for local help is much better done at grassroots level. I don't think we need great big sort of passport systems and things like that. It all sounds a bit bureaucratic. I think most volunteers do it because they want to and, don't wish for any kind of recognition or anything. They just want to help the community. That's my feeling.
You mentioned the volunteer passport, which is an idea to try and manage volunteers better, to make sure that if someone's helping out, they're checked at least, and it's quite safe. But you think, that might put people off in some ways getting involved?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking from a rural community, which I suppose is very different from a city. We all kind of know each other's backgrounds, I suppose, in a village, more or less. And I think we just take people on trust.
And what do you think about where you are? Do you think things have changed for good? That you're never going to go back to the way you were before?
I think people, during lockdown itself, when you could go out and you were allowed to walk outside in the local sort of area, we're lucky we've got a sort of nice countryside to walk in. It was nice then to see people, and I think a lot of people did just strike up conversations with people they perhaps hadn't come across before or hadn't spoken to before. So, that was a good outcome, that you actually became more proactive in seeing and talking to people.
Okay. And do you think that this is going to continue? Can you see the next generation of people in Bishopston getting involved in their community and helping?
Well, it would be nice if that was a legacy of all this. A lot of our volunteers in our village are obviously over 70, and we've been advised not to sort of get involved in things. So there are some younger volunteers who've stepped up, and they've helped out with shopping and collecting prescriptions from our surgery, which is a 20-mile round trip. 20-mile round trip. And so, those people who've stepped up, it would be nice if they, were able to give their time afterwards. Some of them obviously have not been working, so that might be difficult. But we just hope that it will be a legacy of all this.
Yeah. And thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Danny, so what happens next then? You know, we've had 6 months of chaos and of amazing heroics in our community. We've got this 52-page report. What's the next step?
Well, the next step, as I said, is for it to be properly discussed and consulted on. I do want to just come back a bit on both Keith and Anne have made the same point, which is that people are stepping forward without any encouragement from government, and that is the amazing thing we've seen. But it's not true that we don't need more of it, and that we don't need that process to be a bit managed in some cases. Not in our little villages, I completely agree. Where people know each other and what they're doing is just helping out their neighbours, of course, that should happen without any government involvement at all. But our whole society needs more voluntary effort, and we have it in lots of ways, but we don't have quite enough. So we need more scoutmasters, we need more school governors, we need more special constables, we need more magistrates, we need more charity governors. Quite important kind of jobs that actually require you to take a proper responsibility and have some legal responsibility. We need to get more people stepping up into those roles. And the idea of the volunteer passport is that it would make it much easier to do that, to match the supply of people who've got time and expertise and the demand for their services. And it would mean that it would be much easier to move between different voluntary roles, actually reduce the bureaucracy rather than having to fill in loads of forms and do DBS checks and all that business every time you do something different. Okay. So the whole idea is to bring more volunteers out and to make sure they can play a part. So I just hope we can have a big conversation about what the kind of society we want to be, which in my mind is a more local, more human, less bureaucratic, less centralised system in which big government and big business dominates everything. We want to get away from that and have a more local and more civil society. And I think that's the great legacy that we could achieve from this terrible crisis we've been through.
Okay, thank you for your time today. Much appreciated. Danny Kruger, MP for Devizes. What do you make of what you've heard?